Hello and welcome to my channel if you're new here, and welcome back if you've been here before. If you could, please click the subscribe button down below, and if you like this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and I always appreciate comments on my videos, especially my review videos. Today I'm going to be reviewing A Catholic Vote for Trump, and this is by Jesse Romero with John McCullough, and the subtitle on it is "The Only Choice in 2020 for Republicans, Democrats, and Independents Alike." Now, I read this book after reading Catholic Voting and Mortal Sin, and I went into this one knowing that it takes sort of a different angle than the other one. The other one focuses pretty much on abortion and why, as a Catholic, you cannot vote for a Democrat. Actually, the same thing was much talked about by Father Altman in one of his videos that caused quite a stir. He's a wonderful priest, so if you haven't yet, I highly recommend you go check out that video. And I will also have the link to the review I did on Catholic Voting and Mortal Sin. It should be linked up above. If not, I'll have it in the description. But I read this book because I wanted to sort of see what his angle was. And being that's a Catholic vote for Trump, it focuses more on Trump, or at least I thought it would. Now, getting into the table of contents on it, there's a foreword, a preface, an introduction. Chapter 1 is Love. 2 is Main Street versus Wall Street. Chapter 3 is The Corrupt Establishment. Chapter 4 is Fake News. Chapter 5 is The People versus the Global Elites. Chapter 6 is Foreign Policy. Chapter 7 is I Will Rout You Out. 8 is The Swamp Strikes Back, and then there's a conclusion. And then he has an afterword and 2 appendixes. Now, in reading this, I honestly expected there to be a little bit more focus on Donald Trump as far as his attributes and why to vote for him. Now, not to say that there isn't that material included, but while the foreword and the preface start out really good, by all rights, the introduction should be a chapter. I mean, it's long. The introduction is probably one of the longest introductions I've seen in a book, and it could hold its own as a chapter. So I'm not sure why you put that as an introduction instead. The preface probably could have been kind of an introduction for it. But the foreword is written by Father Frank Pavone. It's really good. Now, getting into the book, like I said, I expected to be more of touting why to vote for Trump in general, looking into his attributes and that sort of thing. And it does to a degree, but not as much as I was expecting, really. It's like Catholic Voting and Mortal Sin focused specifically on the arguments against abortion and how voting goes along with that and why you can't vote for a particular person. But then it doesn't just focus on this election, it focuses on future elections. This book, based on the title, you could kind of get the idea that once this election's over, it doesn't really apply to any more future circumstances. It's like, once the election's over, this book is good for research purposes, but outside of that, it doesn't apply to any future events. The ironic thing is, though, is that outside of the title, it kind of does. Because like I said, he doesn't focus as much on Trump and his attributes and why he's such an awesome president and why to vote for him as I expected. So just looking at the table of contents again, when he starts getting into Main Street versus Wall Street, he talks about how Trump is more focused on Main Street than Wall Street, which a lot of people would presume and expect that he wasn't because he's, rich and he is a real estate tycoon type guy. And so you'd think they'd be more interested in Wall Street, but he's not. He's out to help the little guy in Main Street because Trump realizes that if those guys flounder, the rest is sunk too. And so that's, I gotta say, chapter 1 and chapter 2 Chapter 1 was really good overall. Chapter 2 was kind of a slow start, and then I kind of got to the end of the chapter. I'm like, okay, now it's getting somewhere. To be honest with you, I think I had that experience with pretty much every chapter. And chapter 7 is really short. It's all of like 2 pages long. So it's concise and it's well written, and I did like that. But every other chapter I noticed that it seemed to like, there was stuff in the chapters that would have been better as just more appendix, like, you know, give the highlights, say these are the issues I want to address, and address them, and talk about Trump's involvement in them, and then say these details can be found in the appendix and back. And that way you could look that stuff up if you wanted to. But my husband bought it when it first came out. I believe that Jesse Romero was on Church Militant recently, and I can't remember if it was him or his publisher, but one of them is offering the book at 50% off, which, to be honest with you, it's the end of September, more or less, and I'm not really surprised because Election Day is November 3rd. So, in a way, this book is going to time out, and in a way, it's still useful because he talks about the deep state. He addresses the Clintons, Biden, and their families and their involvements in politics. And as far as the deep state and how the deep state, well, naturally can't stand Trump, which is a good thing because if they like Trump, then there'd be something to really be concerned about. So those issues are addressed. But I think the title's maybe a little bit not quite appropriate for the book because the way they've handled it, like there's Trump's speech in here. There's a few of actually his speeches in here. There's also references to like quotes from G.K. Chesterton, which are really good. But outside of that, I mean, if you want to put out a book that can be used for years to come, you can't make the topic so narrow. And while in content, you know, he doesn't focus as much on Trump as I expected. So it could be, you know, more of a book that goes beyond Donald Trump into future presidencies. With a title like that, A Catholic Vote for Trump, well, in 4 more years, what are you going to do with it? Unless one of his kids runs, but still, that's way far ahead. And, I mean, if you look at the cover, it has Donald Trump on it. So obviously they're talking about Donald Trump. And it talks about a lot of his accomplishments, which he's had a lot of. But it also focuses in large part on the reason to vote for Trump, in part being how bad the establishment and the other guys are. Which is a valid reason to vote for Trump because the other guys are just that bad. I just think it would have been better if he'd focused more on what Trump has done and why it's a good idea to vote for Donald Trump because he is Donald Trump and what he has done as a president. So there are some chapters where I think they could have like sort of flipped the content, had the Donald Trump stuff at the beginning and then have the other guys and what he was fighting against afterwards, but that's just the way they put the book together. So depending on your viewpoint, it may or may not be worth picking up and be worth the read. I think Catholic Voting in Mortal Sin was probably a better book. I'm interested in getting into some of Jesse's other books because I don't know if this is his writing style or if it just happened to be in this book, but it wasn't as smooth a read as some of the other books that I've read and done reviews on. So I think in a large part, this book was kind of written to target more of those people who might not otherwise vote for Trump. Problem is, those people, chances are, won't pick up the book at all. But for those who already would vote for Trump, I mean, yeah, it gives you more support in your decision, but you probably know most of the stuff that's already in this book. Even if you don't, I mean, it can help give you more confidence in your vote. but it's not necessarily that particularly useful. And I did like especially how the preface starts, because it's a 13-year-old boy asking his dad about Donald Trump. And he goes, "Papa, how can you vote for him? My then 13-year-old son asked me one night in 2016. He's so crude." The him of the question was, of course, the candidate Donald Trump. I answered, "Brendan, I know he swears and is crude, but so are a lot of the best men I've ever known. I've known guys who talk like sailors and haven't darkened the door of a church in years, if not decades, and they would give you the shirt off their back. And I've known men who present themselves as holier than thou. It would certainly never use bad words, but they'd stab you in the back and not think twice about it. Trump is crude, but those other men so worried about what he says have had their chance to run the country. A lot of those men and women in those debates and other pundits who express outrage at Trump's coarseness have the ethnic cleansing and blood of hundreds of thousands of Christians on their hands from the Middle East wars that unleashed hell on those poor people. That's crude, and they're worried about swearing and rough language. Have those Catholics who judged Trump but supported those disastrous people apologized? He should be mad. He should be swearing. Drive around the country and look at what has been done. Not happened, what has been done to the working class in this country while those guys make speeches and promises and nothing ever changes for the better." That was the way one Catholic father explained his support for Donald Trump when his son asked him, and his enthusiasm for the man did not wane. Later, when Hillary Clinton ran what was probably her most memorable television ad spot, the one which featured little kids transfixed in front of the TV screen while Trump seemingly shouted, "They can go," expletive there, "themselves." My son looked at me expectantly with a look that said, "What about that?" I replied, "That there is why I'm voting for him." And it goes on. And I gotta say, if the rest of the book carried on as well as that beginning in the preface there, it'd have been a lot more smooth of a read. But there were parts where, yeah, I actually would jump to the end of the chapter, kind of look at what was going on at the end of the chapter, and then go back, be like, oh, okay. And I think that happened probably about the third or fourth chapter when I started doing that. The first chapter was decent. The second chapter was kind of slow. And then right at the end, that's when it picked up. So I'm looking forward to check out some of his other books because my husband has bought them before. I rarely have to actually look at buying a book because usually my husband's already bought it. It would definitely be a personal choice of whether or not you want to invest your money in buying this book, especially so close to the election. It will definitely help you out as far as education on the deep state and what's been going on in the thick of it that most people probably ignored or maybe just didn't know about. Like I said, it doesn't really run on Donald Trump's accomplishments as much as I would have liked it to, which it really shocked me. But that's what I found about this book. I don't think it's going to be as useful after the election as I thought it would be when I first picked it up. But I will be moving on to another book. There's a few that I'm looking at right now. One that I'd ordered back when I was reading Infiltration in School of Darkness. That's about what a priest's jobs and responsibilities are. So I'm looking at possibly reading that, or my husband just got another book in the mail that looks really, really good. So I'm contemplating which one I'm going to pick up next, but I will be doing that shortly, and then I'll give you the review on that. But there's a few that I'm looking at that are really intriguing, and it's just too many books and not enough time. So anyway, thank you for watching this video. Please comment down below what your thoughts are on this review and this book, and if you think it's something that you'd want to purchase, or with the format of it, if it's just sort of a time-sensitive type of book and issue. If you haven't yet, please click subscribe down below. If you haven't yet and you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video.